So, thank you for the invite. It's great to be here and to be able to share. Basically, I'd like to share a short story about how I got excited about local manufacturing and how that has led to starting a company and where we're actually going with that company, what we're doing now, and what the near future of that will be. But as Vincent said, my background is in architecture, so the last project I worked on from concept to completion took 4 years. It took a very long piece of my life. It was exciting, but it was a bit too slow. And it also really made me think about, as designers, how close are we to the systems, underlying systems behind the design of things? Can we move beyond designing objects and actually understand those systems? And for me, that was about the means of production, about getting closer to the making and the production of goods. And one of the reasons that I got excited about that was what I saw as an increased access to tools, to technology distributing and democratizing access through software, increasingly open and available, and interesting kind of hardware, digital fabrication tools. Some of them are new and emerging, and some which have been around for many years, like CNC milling, which is actually a very established technology. So that's actually the technology that we started to look into. And what we saw is, as obviously technology matures, the cost comes down and the access to it increases. And this is something we think is very powerful, because it really starts to change our relationship as designers with the goods we produce. Now, instead of taking 4 years to make a building, I can get a prototype back within 4 hours, or probably quicker. Soon, as technology develops, I can actually design something and test it and get rapid prototypes and feedback. And so this led me over the last couple of years to start a company called Opendesk with a group of people in East London, and it's really a platform for local production. I'm going to talk through a little bit about how it works and how and why we're doing it. But in essence, it's a library of designs and then a network of producers, independent workshops all around the world. And you can actually search with a postcode. You can find the nearest workshop to you. And we try and make things in your city. Why did we get excited about this? Well, it's really started with thinking critically about the 20th century model of production, which is really one that is based on a model where we design things in one location, we heavily protect them, we prototype them under a lot of secrecy, we then make them many thousands of miles away, often in places that we've never seen, people we've never met. We don't have a clue what the working conditions are like or anything. It's something about making where land and labor is cheapest, and then we have to rely on huge logistical efforts to get things back to often the place where they were designed, that kind of the same market. We think that there's a better way, and we think that technology is unlocking this because it's allowing us to design and make in a kind of scale-free, geographically free way. Yes, it's digital tools, but it's also things like Creative Commons licenses, which allow designers to increasingly collaborate and share across boundaries. So this is about supply chains becoming much more local, much more human-scaled, and much more social. And that's, again, what excited us as designers. So it's about going from well-known sort of flows to something which is actually very hard to see because it's right down at the scale of a city. So this is London, and we're talking about hyper-local supply chains. We're talking about people making things within a couple of kilometers from where they're actually going to be used. And so we started out by actually asking ourselves a question: can this be a viable business? Can we actually create something beyond the hobby project, beyond the sort of DIY project, but actually something which says there's already a community of digital designers using all wonderful, incredible software, modeling and tools. There is already a network of many thousands of workshops scattered around the world with the tools, with the capacity, with the skills, but they're often not known. We wouldn't know where to find them necessarily. And if we could actually find a way to bring this to people's attention through a web platform and find a suitable way to actually share digital files to be then made in these locations, that's the kind of question we're asking, is that possible? And of course, one thing that really excites us is this is about professional making, but it's also about the very long tail, which really is about people making things and sort of learning by doing. So this is an example of someone who's downloaded a Blackfoot CNC machine, which you can download the plans. You can basically hook up your laptop. You can buy a few parts in your hardware store, and you can basically set yourself up as a producer. You can actually make all the furniture that we have on our website on this machine. Obviously, it would take you a lot more time than a big professional machine, but it's still possible. So the story behind Opendesk, we got challenged as designers by a digital agency, as a company in London, to make some furniture for them. They wanted us to design it with them. They wanted to be part of the design process. They also had an office in New York as well as London, and they wanted the same furniture in both locations. So we learned about this process of distributing digital design through a real-life project that initially these guys thought we would just make all the furniture in London and ship it across the Atlantic. We realized that we could ship basically the recipe for the furniture and make it locally, so we could send it as software. For those of you that don't know a CNC machine, this is just cutting pieces out of sheet materials. I'll talk about materials a bit later. Part of the design challenge for us was designing something very simple, so deliberately only using one material, one process, and designing something without too many Allen keys or fixings that are needed. Ideally, just something that slots together and really kind of simply assembles. So after that, what did we do? Well, we actually built a website, and we got loads of people asking us for other pieces of furniture. We started with one desk. The most requested item was a desk that could be adjusted, the height adjusted. So we took the original design, we kind of tweaked it, and we came up with something that is manually height adjustable. Then we had people sending designs to us from all over the world. We've literally got inboxes rammed full of 3D models, some of them not very good, some of them good. And we actually went through a process of saying, oh, this is really interesting. Can we actually work with any of the designs that have been sent over? How could we actually build a platform that's not just for local manufacturing, but it's about enabling and empowering emerging designers to have a new route to market? It's actually quite hard to work with established manufacturing furniture companies, for example, but could we provide an alternative route? So this is something we are also doing. And this has resulted in a whole library of a catalog of products. These two are interesting because the table was inspired by somebody who lives on a canal boat and made the trestles so that he could work on the side of the canal, and because he didn't have space in his boat. So we actually contacted him and said, this is a great idea. How about we work together and turn this into a design that could be made through our whole network of makers. The other design, which you can see outside, is just a very simple bookshelf, and it's by some designers in Chicago. And what's interesting there is that we've never physically met each other. We've just worked remotely because we've been sharing 3D models, sharing files, sharing photos, and we've been able to prototype things at distance. And so this has resulted in, as I said, a library of designs on our platform that's growing all the time. But when we talk about local manufacturing, where are these makers? How many are we talking about? What do we actually, what do we mean? What we mean is kind of local means distributed. It means a global network. It means finding people who are already there doing great work, but often are very hard to find. There's people in cities that we've kind of uncovered making great products, but sometimes their businesses are struggling because no one can actually find them there. So we started with this question, like, how would we actually connect all these interesting fabricators? We built a separate site which allows people to sign up called Fab Hub. And this really started to uncover just the scale of production that goes on locally, or can go on locally. These are digital makers using all different kinds of tools, from laser cutters, 3D printers, and CNC machines. And just to give you an example, if you're in London and you search with, search with the London postcode, you will get a whole host of different fabricators will sort of become available, and this will increasingly sort of move just slightly. Stop the music. So just introducing 3 of these workshops. This is a Fab Lab, so this is a kind of workshop where you can actually join up, a bit like joining a gym. You get a membership, it's very cheap. Then you can go and actually learn how to use the tools. You can make furniture for yourself. They have school groups that go in here. So people are really kind of learning by doing. It's a very kind of communal environment. But at the same time, in order to fund this, they need to make commercial work. So when in London somebody wants a small order of Opendesk furniture, this would be a potentially one of the workshops that we would contact. On a larger scale, we basically work with all different scales of workshop. These guys are in New York City, in Brooklyn, and so if somebody was needing, let's say, 50 desks for their office, we'd probably contact someone of the scale of these guys. So we are able to match the size of an order with the capabilities of the workshop. And then back to the garage. So this is one of my favorite stories. It's a guy called Kyle in San Diego in the US who is basically a fabricator in his spare time, and it was his passion to sort of become a woodworker, crafter, full-time. And so through the Opendesk platforms, through some of the work that he's received from us alongside other things that he does, he's now been able to turn that into his full-time work. So these kind of stories are the things that really inspire us. A little journey to show you. So this is one of the first projects we delivered after we'd started the company. This is for Greenpeace. This is their offices in London. Obviously, Greenpeace, very interesting company to work with, because they really care about where their products are made. They have to kind of know a lot about them. They want to know the materials, where those materials come from, the whole chain of custody of the material. But they also really care about the people making the product. So they don't want their products to be made in a faceless factory thousands of miles away. They want to ideally meet the people that are going to make them and sort of find out, are they being fairly paid? Are they being well treated? So they set us a challenge, which was we'd like to visit the people that are going to make our office in London in our lunch break. And because we're Greenpeace, we were going to cycle there on our folding bike. So it has to be close enough to get there in about 10 minutes. And so luckily, there's a happy ending to the story. There's a workshop very close by in Hackney, in East London. Here they are, and Greenpeace office is down on the left, and the workshop is up at the top right. So that's about 10 minutes in a car. It's about the same in a bike. So this just to say that in cities around the world, this kind of production is possible. This kind of production is happening. I could show maps for New York, San Francisco, Paris, Singapore, Milan. And so, yeah, and the other thing to say, this isn't just about sort of small startup companies, but we're talking about big global sort of leading companies saying, yes, we also like this story, we like this way of doing things, we see the value in it. And so we've been very lucky to work with everybody from sort of early adopter startup companies right through to some of the leading brands. And then the next sort of thing I wanted to discuss is, what does this mean for designers? What does local production, distributed design mean? How does it change the way we design and work? One of the things that we think is really interesting is it sort of stops the product from becoming a fixed item. In some ways, we're starting to think of products as things which are just a starting point. They're things that can change, that multiple authors can contribute to, things which can emerge, adapt, improve. And so, because we're talking about digital models, we're starting with software, we're starting with versions. That's actually something that we see in software design. So web coders, people that, for a lot of us, I think, I don't really understand. They're really designers that we're looking to say, how are they working? Well, they've actually got platforms like GitHub, which shows on the left all the designers that work on a project. And it's like a family tree, which gives attribution to every designer. It allows designers to use the work of others and to build off the back of it, so they're not reinventing the wheel every time. But they're also credited, so at the end of a project, the attribution of every designer is maintained. So this is something that we think is going to be very exciting when it starts to be applied to physical objects. And then a very basic example of this is a designer called Denis Fuzi in Sao Paulo in Brazil, who shared with us his chair. And he shared it in such a way that he chose a Creative Commons license, and we worked with him, made a few small changes, prototyped it again, and made it available through our platform. And he chose a license which allows himself to keep the attribution on the design, but allow people to download it and make it for themselves in their garage, in their Fab Lab, their local workshop. But when it gets made professionally for a large company like a Google or a Nike, he would like to earn a design royalty or a fee. So he's chosen a license which is about trust, but it's also about openness, and that's also allowed some interesting things. For example, Cécile in Paris, who's taken Denis's design and said, I'd like to try this out as a rocking chair. This is a very basic example. We can imagine multi-authored projects in time, and we also don't really know if this chair works. This throws up a lot of challenges. Who's now the author? Who takes responsibility? If this rocking chair gets made, who gets the design fee? Is it split equally? These are all challenges that we think are really exciting and interesting. We don't have the answers to all of them yet, but we think the conversation is one that's going to be coming, especially with things like blockchain that can actually kind of, you would be able to attribute this very, very clearly in the future or soon. And of course, with digital design comes the ability to personalize, to customize, to think about products that can be modular and upgraded and swapped, and we can integrate with other third-party parts. So we think this is quite an interesting challenge for designers to start to think about things being less fixed. And then what does this mean, this local production mean for everybody else, for all of us, for all the consumers, purchasers, clients? Well, we think it means that we can cut out a lot of things that aren't so great, like shipping, like logistics, like retail markups, like waste. We think that this could be applied to many different companies. We think that Opendesk is just a very small example of what we hope a lot of other people will start to do. It means that through digital design, as we've seen earlier, consumers, customers, people in their office can start to imagine how it's going to be. They can start to maybe customize the shape or the size of something. They can maybe change the color or add their logo or do something else that personalizes it. And then, in our case, everything's made post-purchase. So you would be buying something and it's going to be made afterwards. It's not coming out of a warehouse. How are we doing this? Well, this is a very complicated slide, deliberately complicated to say that actually there's a whole team of people in London working on this. It's a pretty tough challenge. It's basically saying at the top there's loads of digital files. If you imagine all of us here design something and then we all collaborated with each other to change it, that would already be quite complicated. And then you have to think about all the sizes, all the thicknesses, all the different materials. It becomes a very complicated project to manage versions. And what happens if somebody wants something that was made 2 years ago and they want the old version? They want to go backwardly compatible. So you have to really think about compatibility, version control. How do you present this to people online? Well, we've seen from Vincent how you might start to do that. We've got a very basic website at the moment, but that's something we're developing. And then, when you've found the local person on your street to make it, how do you supply to them the manufacturing data, the digital files of that configuration? You chose maybe the 2-year-old desk that you took, and then you changed it, and you added your logo. How do you actually serve that file to that local person? So this is quite a complicated challenge, and I could talk a lot about that, but I probably shouldn't. I'll run out of time. But one of the things is, okay, we can deal with things in the real world problems like tolerances. All materials have tolerances. People always ask, how do we make the same piece of furniture around the world with the same quality? Well, it's tough, but we have to do things like export a file based on an exact measurement in somebody's workshop down to the 10th of a millimeter. What does local production mean? It means that we can start to think about local materials. Now, this, for me, is one of the most exciting things. It's still early days. Right now, we're using plywood sheet materials because it's universally available. But there are a host of materials being developed, and we think that local production means that there can be an ecosystem around materials. On the left, you have waste fabric that's being turned into a rigid fiber board in Copenhagen. In the middle, we have things like yogurt pots that are being compressed into sheet materials in South Wales in the UK. And then on the right, we have waste wool and bio-resin that's being turned into sheet material in Cornwall, again in the UK. So we actually see local production and this distribution of design as something that can start to be layered on top of with data, with things like knowing your location and knowing what materials are available within a radius of where you are. We can start to give choice to customers, and we can give people smart choices. We can actually, through transparency, people can see, okay, I'm going to have a table that's made not only down the road, but it's from a material that would otherwise have gone into a waste stream. Or they can choose not to, but at least they've actually got the choice. So this is what we see as a more circular approach. It's about a closed loop. It's about having materials that don't ever go into the ground. They actually get repurposed, remanufactured into usable materials. And what else do we think local production allows for? It allows, we think, interesting collaborations. So we don't think it's about a black or white kind of polar opposite where we have big companies and then we have independent producers. This, for example, is a collaboration we did with IKEA with a system that they worked on with Tom Dixon. The Tom Dixon bits are the kind of aluminium bits. And most of the other bits are Opendesk bits that have been made locally using different kinds of materials with our maker network. So this idea that you could have very efficiently produced parts combined with very locally relevant and specific elements to create things which are in some way more powerful, more desirable, more relevant to what someone might need locally. And maybe those things can then get put back into a system and repurposed. So yeah, we think that that's exciting. And then actually just to end on, I think the other thing that local does is every piece is made for you locally. You start to know more about it. We like to think of every piece not having a warehouse kind of code, like a stock keeping unit, but it has a code which is more like a passport number or an ISBN number on a book, so a code that you can search and you can find out more about the book, or the passport has details like useful information. So what we're actually saying is that every piece of furniture soon for us will have a digital identity, which is actually saying, okay, this is an Opendesk piece that was designed by this person in this location. This is the version of it. It was downloaded by this maker, in this case, San Francisco. Rob then made it. He made it from these materials. Here's the file. Here's the chain of custody material. Here's the version. Here's the date it was made. Here's all the information. So what does this mean? It means that products, we think, will no longer be static and just bought, consumed, disposed of. They'll actually start to acquire a history over time. Maybe they actually acquire value because we can start to, through this platform, we can start to actually, if we had a great meeting around a table or a dinner party, we could post a photo and say, this was used in Milan 2018. Or we broke the leg of this table doing something stupid, so we went down the road and got a new leg made from this material. We can actually enrich the life of objects. So that's why I'm excited about local manufacturing. Thanks.